Alright, now that it's been a week, I feel like I'd update my review and kind of give my thoughts and opinions now that I have more thoughts on it, especially after using it for a certain amount of time, while also talking about some of the stuff I saw in the comments as well, and kind of just going through every little detail that I did notice. So the first thing that I noticed in the comments was people asking if you were able to change the lights on the controller, which let's go ahead and power it up. As you can see, it's the rumble, so there you go. And then if you hit the turbo button and then you hit the left stick, it'll change the light on the top right from just on to off. Now if I do the same thing with the right stick, I'll just show it on this end so that way it's a little bit easier to see. You could go ahead and see that the colors do change. So if you just want a singular color, or which one of my commenters was asking about, you could just have it where it's just completely off. But you could obviously still tell that it is on from the fact that the like controller counter, I guess, on the bottom is still lit up. But yeah, I figured that might extend the battery life just a little bit more, which I can definitely see why you might want to do that. Or from my issue that I was talking about, because the buttons are A, B on the basically opposite side of what you would see on something like a DS, for example, or some of the other Nintendo consoles, since it does follow more of a Xbox scheme, I could definitely see maybe wanting to turn that off and then being like, okay, well, let me just turn that off. And then there you go. I won't really get confused by the buttons anymore. I'm not going to follow the lights. I'll just follow based off of muscle memory, right? As per usual, you're going to have to forgive me for having to use this camera, because I just don't have anything other than my OBS camera, or my HD 60S camera that I'm able to use right now, because I'm gonna have to be recording on my or I'm gonna have to be showing my phone, right? The one thing that I did want to mention, I do think is worth noting, is we could go ahead and see that this is in grams, and I'll just go ahead and take my Xbox controller and just put this on top. You can see that it's about 296 grams, or if you would like it in pounds, it's in basically 0.6 of a pound, or 6.5 tenths of a pound, right? More measurements and stuff like that. That's kilograms. That's grams. But let's just go back to pounds, right? So I wanted to show something, right? So the controller by itself is not that heavy. It's actually less heavier than a standard controller, but you add the phone on top of it, and it's already looking at above a pound, right? Go ahead and look and shuffle through the other stuff. I believe that is ounces, and then we can go ahead and look at this. That's kilograms, and it's going to be grams. So that's something that I think is worth noting, is that while the actual controller is pretty lightweight compared to other controllers, it's obviously going to be more heavy once you add the phone on top of it, because it's just going to be like, if you're going to be using this for something like traveling or something like that, it's going to be ×2 the amount of like a regular standard controller, which again, 1 pound doesn't sound heavy, but you're holding that pound for multiple hours if you are planning on doing this on like a trip or anything. And something I noticed was that my like hands started cramping from just having it constantly inside of the basically the holder. But again, guess what you could always just do? Use the controller by itself. Obviously, because it's a Bluetooth controller, you don't have to have the controller portion holding onto your phone. Yes, it's going to feel more like a Switch, but you don't really have to have it like that. Something I've also seen as well is devices like I'm not sure what it specifically is, but there are like bed stands, or like these little like crane looking things that will hold onto your phone, and then you would just be able to use like the remote on top of that. But I feel like that's a little bit excessive for just like, I don't know, like propping your knees up and then putting your your controller or phone in between your knees. But I figured I'd worth mentioning, because I do know some people who do have that, right? But let's go ahead and go into the next point. All right, now let's go ahead and look back at the emulator. So if we go ahead and click on the settings on the top left, We can go ahead and see that it's right now just currently the touchscreen because I don't have any of the controllers connected, but we'll connect it in a couple of seconds. The thing I did want to talk about was that if you do want to go ahead and change how it looks like for the controller, for if you're not using or like the scheme of things, if you aren't using the controller, you can go ahead and change that as well. I do believe that you could also, or here we'll just go ahead and show the controller, right? So now I connect it, and then it does say the DualShock 4 wireless. Then we can hit customize controls, and then it shows the controls. Whoops, there we go. DS, and then there we go. You can see here that I already remapped my controls because I did want to have it where it was different buttons than it originally was. So most of the time it's going to be mapped something like this, which is exactly how the controller will see it, right? The only issue that comes with this, I'm sorry, no, it would be like this, my bad. Because the controller has it where the buttons on the controller are different than what it actually shows on the DS, basically. I would have to go ahead and change it like how I did, where I made A button be the right button, I made B button be the bottom, I made X be the left, and I made Y be the top. The main reason because of this is because, like I said, the controller has a different button layout than what you would actually have in a DS game. I personally like to have it where the back buttons are the L and the R as well, but that's just more so personal preference, and I'll go ahead and just save this. You could also customize the controls for the touchscreen like how I was talking about before, and even change the skins as well. I've seen some people already change it too. And then there was one more thing that I wanted to talk about that I remember looking at the last time, and then I just totally glossed over it. 1 second. All right, so here we have the settings on the controller. Here's the thing I was talking about earlier, where you can have it where you can customize the settings. Let me just go ahead and connect my controller, which should only take a second. There you go, it's connected. Then we can go ahead and customize the controller based off of the preferences that we want to do. Here we go. Let's go ahead and go to DS because that's what I was using earlier. Now, as you can see, I was talking about it earlier, because the Y button is the top button on the controller, but is the left button on the DS. I can go ahead and switch that around. So even though the controller isn't showing the same thing, I'm still going to be pressing the top button, and obviously the X button is going to be chosen. I also had it where I switched the back left and back right on the controller to be the L and the R button on the DS, because I feel like that's probably the easiest for me. But yeah, there's obviously all the other stuff that you can select here too. It's basically just, you know, you're able to map all this stuff. You don't have to map the analog either. It's just automatically, or yeah, you don't have to map the analog stick because it already just goes with the D-pad, right? But if I really did want to, you know, like I could just do it like this, where I make it specifically the left stick if you don't want to use the D-pad. But again, it's not really going to matter because the D-pad could still work. Or I'm sorry, the left stick could still work without you having to touch the D-pad, which I'll show in a second while I go ahead and save. And while I open up the game, we will be right back. All right, so the game is open. I can go ahead and press start. And then you can see that my save file is right there. And even though I'm pressing the A button, it's going, or the B button, it's going to go forward. And we can see there. Again, it is pretty nice to have it where it's just like all of this stuff is already all hooked up, which is really nice. We can go ahead and I could show that, like, if I wanted to, I could save again, and then it's just going to do it like how we did before, which, I mean, like, it's basically your standard emulator experience, right? I'll go ahead and go back to main menu. The other thing I wanted to talk about too was the saves in general. So if you go ahead and go all the way down to service over here, you can see that you could actually sync up your data between either Google Drive or Dropbox. All you have to do is sign in, and then your data will obviously be synced to either one. So if you did want to download either you know, save file, you could already go ahead and, like, okay, well, maybe I don't want to play it on my phone anymore, I want to play on the computer. Boom, you could swap it over to the computer, excuse me. If you don't want to have it on the computer anymore, you can swap it over to your phone. Boom, you can play it on the phone instead. And then the other thing I mainly forgot to talk about is the controller actually works with both iOS, Android, and PC, I believe. The Android part, 100%, it does work with Android. I haven't tested it with my computer just yet, but I probably will eventually. But still, it's not like I said, it's not bad, especially for the price that it is. When we go ahead and look at something else, here, let me just go ahead and get out of settings real quick. When we go ahead and look at something else like the backbone, which is I've talked about that one a little bit, right? The main issues that I had with the backbone was that your phone had to be plugged in 24/7, and yes, you could charge your phone through the controller, but like I was talking about earlier, the weight can definitely be an issue, and it's going to be noticeable. Like, even if you are just playing casually, I would still say that you notice it a little bit. But with this, it's so much easier because obviously it's just a Bluetooth remote, right? And so far, the battery has actually lasted me a while. The one thing I will say that is a little bit of a disappointment, though, is that you're not actually able to tell how much the battery is. Let me check the settings real quick and see if I could like find it anywhere in my iPhone. But in terms of like the actual controller itself, there's no indicator to tell you what the battery is low, other than when it's at, I believe, the last 10%, and then the green light will start flashing, similar to like a DS if you have ever had your DS slowly dying. I totally forgot that there actually is a widget, or I guess it's called a stack that you can put on the home screen if you go on iOS, and you are able to actually see the battery of the controller, which is actually really nice. I did wish there was probably a way to see it while like on the actual controller itself. Like, I was just talking about it. This remote is obviously called the DualShock 4 remote, but I feel like they could have had like a little bar maybe on the bottom left that like slowly drains, or having it where the color that it was would depend on what or how much the battery life actually was. So like, instead of it being like a green light right now, instead of that, maybe it would be like a yellow because we're starting to get below 50%. Maybe it's like green at 75 to 100, then it's like blue at like 50 to 75, like yellow from 25 to 50, and then from 0 to 25 it's like flashing red or something. Like, I feel like that could have definitely been something that would have changed with this remote, but that's more of like a nitpick, I guess, than anything. Because like I said, you could literally just go back to the home menu and then boom, there's the battery right there. And something I definitely have noticed is I've only charged this remote twice, and in that 2 times while charging it, this remote hasn't, like I said it, I've used this for a week and I've only charged this twice, and it still has 45%. Granted, I'm not playing it all the time, but like, I have been playing it for enough hours where you would think that the battery would be draining a lot more than it has been. So yeah, having like the battery be as big as it was is pretty cool. Which reminds me, I got it wrong with how much the battery life was the last time, so let me go ahead and correct that, right? Let me go ahead and pull up this real quick. All right, if we go ahead and now head over to the Amazon website, something that you'll definitely notice is that like I was talking about before, with the fact that it is usually $50, but even then it's not that bad. But they did have a coupon where it was $5 off. Well, no, I'm sorry. I think mine, the one that I had, was like 15% off or something like that. So it took off like $7, $8. But $5 is still not that bad. And the other thing I got wrong as well was that if we go ahead and scroll down to the bottom, one, it does charge within 2 hours. The other thing I said was that it could last up to 20 hours. Or I believe that it did last up to 20 hours, but that's just wrong. It actually lasts up to 15 hours, but it does charge within 2 hours, so it's not that bad. The other thing I was going to talk about too is that it has a turbo button, but I haven't really noticed a use for it, or if any at all, right? But if we go ahead and look at something like I was talking about with the backbone, for example, this is half the price, but it basically does the same function, if not a little bit better. I think having it where it's just like the Bluetooth functionality of it is so much better, and I'm really glad because they just had it where they made like the USB-C one, or the USB-C one is still $100. It's not like you can get a used one. And my whole thought process when buying this remote was, I don't want to spend $100 on a remote that I don't know if I'm going to use 100 times, right? But I'm going to be honest, going into $50 instead is a lot less of a dent in my wallet. So having this for more of like a casual gamer is just a lot easier. Like, here's the thing I was talking about earlier, just like, you know, it being able to work with both the Android and the iOS. I don't know, like I said, I don't know if it'll work with the Windows as well. I wouldn't be surprised if it was. It doesn't specifically say that you can or can't, but yeah, we'll see about that, right? But yeah, a lot of this stuff here too is just like Game Pass, Steam Link. Like, even if you don't use an emulator, I do think that still having something like this, especially for me, who does have Game Pass and maybe would want to play something like Steam games on my phone now that I have this. Like, it's the poor man's it's the poor man's like what is it, the Steam Deck. It's a poor man's Steam Deck, right? But yeah, like I was talking about with the actual build quality of the remote, like I do like the sticks. I think they feel nice. As for having my phone held on by like these little, like, I guess claw thingies or like grippers, I've tried my best to like kind of like shake my phone out of it, just kind of like as a durability test to see if it would pop out at all. But it surprisingly held up really well. Like, I was full on swinging this towards the floor, well, towards my bed, and it just did not want to pop out my phone. Do I recommend doing that? Definitely not. But that being said, you know, I did want to test it. The other thing I did see was that it says that you could shuffle through the light cycles, which we already did test, but it also says you could turn up the brightness or turn down the brightness. Now, I don't know if it's just because I have to get the app, which I would not be surprised about, but I've held the turbo button, I've moved it like up, I've moved it down, and the brightness doesn't seem to have changed for me. Again, I don't know if that's because I have to download the app. I do know that there is an app that you can download for this, I believe. Or someone, I swear they said that it has an app, unless I'm thinking of another. Yeah, I might have been thinking of a different device, or the what is it called? The backbone that I was talking about earlier. That might have been a device, but even still, like I was talking about, that I feel like that's not that big of a deal. If you don't want the lights on, you could just turn it off, and the lights themselves aren't like, it's not like too bright, but it's not like too low, right? Like, I feel like it's in that sweet spot where it doesn't really matter. I will definitely say, while the grip would obviously be a very difficult thing to make, I would say, especially because it's kind of like an extending thing. I would like to see maybe in the future some sort of like protector, I guess, or like grip, like a plastic grip maybe put on the basically the sides of the controller, where like right around here, so that way you can grip a little bit easier, or it can be a little bit easier on your hands, especially if you are playing for long periods of time. But again, that's just my personal nitpick, I would say. But yeah, I think that covers all the stuff that I didn't say in the first video. The other thing I don't remember if I mentioned, I'm not sponsored, and I'm not getting affiliate links. I'm not getting any money from doing this. I just wanted to, you know, like I said, I'm a very big gamer, and my whole channel is based off of mobile gaming, just one specific app, but even still. So I figured I'd, you know, talk about this, and we're both, like I said, review the product again at least a week later with some of my updated thoughts, but also just kind of giving my thoughts on the emulator so far, which both have been very, very good, right? I do enjoy both. But yeah, Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thank you all for watching, and yeah, hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and hope to see you guys in the next one. Peace.